the half circle one. Take your gray bath, open it. This is half circle. We are not going to fold. We'll fold vertically once, making sure the raw edges meet on a straight line. If your fabric is crumpled, you can use the steam to press it. So after folding once vertically, with a full circle, we would have folded horizontally again like this. But this time, we are not doing the full circle, we are doing the half circle. So after folding once vertically, I'm going to hold the end which has the unfold part and the opening side. I'm going to pull this end to a 45 degrees angle, straight like this, making sure it touches the edge of the fabric. This, and you get a 45 degrees angle. So after pulling, always make sure, if the fabric is too big and after pulling, never overlap the end of the edge. Always, some fabric ends somewhere here after pulling. But make sure, if here is 3 inches, you have the same 3 inches at the end. Never pull and get an uneven edge. So when you finish pulling, when you just get the inner, if some remains, make sure they are all the same measurements. For example, if I wanted to pull just a small one like this, I make sure that here is the same measurement as here is 10 inches, what is left 10 inches. So I just pull it back and I get a true bias. But for the sake of this, I'm going to pull to the end this way here. So you realize the half or the 180 circle, I folded it on it. I'm going to use here for the arc. I'm going to use here for the arc, like what we did in the full circle. Determine where you want to put it. If it's the round arm, use the round arm measurement. If it's the waist, use the waist measurement. Divide into 4 again, because here the layers are 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you divide into 4. If you pull it once without folding it vertically, then you divide into 2. But if the layers are 4, divide by the number of layers you get. If it's 8, divide by 8. So this one is 4. So I'm going to, this time, let's use our round arm. If your round arm is 12 and you divide into 3, you divide by 4, you are going to get 3. If you use your waist and still you're getting the 7.5, use the 7.5 mark like this. If it's for the around arm or the sleeve, make sure you don't add too much allowance to the arc. If you add 1.5 inches to get your 9, it means perhaps you need some for the zip allowance and a lesser allowance on your waist for alteration. But if you don't need the allowance, when you get your 7.5, you can just mark 8. You just need small amount to do your stitching. So this time, let's use the 9. We only run the 7.5 to 8 because perhaps we are not going to fix it on the waist, so we don't need any zip allowance. So you hold your 8 inches mark on the tape measure across the arc again, just like the full circle. Then mark where the 8 inches is. Always make sure this side is almost equal to, it doesn't need to be equal, but almost, not too away from the other side. So I'm going to measure from the arc, put my thumb on the tape measure. I'm getting 10.5 here. I'm getting almost 11 here, which is fine. So I'm going to use my 10.5 mark to do the arc. It's the same arc for the full circle. This one is just the folding that differentiates. So I'm going to hold the tip, use 10.5 to mark my arc. 10.5, hold the tip, mark 10.5 again. Put my thumb on it, mark 10.5, move 10.5, 10.5. So you realize you get an arc. Always don't trace the arc back until you are sure you've gotten what you want. So I'm going to measure the arc. This is 8.2, which is not too bad. If you still need exactly 8, the 10.5 you can reduce it and use it. So this time I'm going to use this 8.2 arc. Good. So I've gotten my arc. I need the length. This is how wide we want to cut. We use the weight, either the waist or the round arm to mark, divide by 4 inches and add a little allowance. So now we are going to do the length. So let me measure. This is our 15.5. So assuming I want a 10 inches arc length, just have to add my 2 inches allowance. So I'm going to get 12. So I'm going to mark 12 on it. Stand on the pivoting point. Measure from the pivot end to where I marked my length that I want. So I'm getting 23 inches. So I'm going to hold the pivoting point, move my tape measure around and mark the 23 mark on the 23 mark. Hold the pivoting end 23. Always hold, make sure you stand on the pivoting point 23 and mark what you need. So this is the length I want, the 12 inches length. I'm just going to retrace my arc, then cut my 2 mark. Mind you, if you are using the bias for a skirt part and you need a zip allowance, you can always put your zip allowance on this flat end. So if you're using it for your skirt, just add your back zip allowance here. Straight. By this time, if you are using it for just a sleeve, you can do it without the zip allowance. So cut. So assuming we are using it for the sleeve, we would have cut the 1.5 on this mark straight like this. We are using it for the waist. So you get your zip allowance right from the flat end. So this, when you open, let me cut the arc to show you why it's a half circle. So when you open, you are going to get a half circle, this time not a full circle. So this explains the half circle 180 that we got. So when you want to use this for a sleeve, you can just stitch the end and join it to your sleeve end. If you want to use it for your waist, you pin the zip allowance. You mark the zip allowance you are going to use. If it's 1.5, mark it at the end. Then pin on the 1.5. That is it for if it's for the waistline. Now when you finish, open and place the zip allowance at the middle. You make sure the left side is equal to the right side from the middle point. This one is 9 inches, 9.5. So I'll just shift and get the middle part. So 9.2, 9.2. So this part becomes the front and this part becomes the back. So you can just cut the side. And this becomes, so you realize with the half circle, you don't get too much folds in it. The full circle gives you a much fuller or more fabric in there. The half circle, which is called the bias, gives you fullness, but not as much as the full circle. That one, the full circle, you get more folds in it. This is the full circle, the front. So you realize there are more fabrics in making it more fuller. So this is the full circle for the front with the, and this for the bias. They are all flares, but the more flare you want, you know which type to use, whether the full circle or the half circle. In summary, when you are cutting fullness, just know what weight you want to cut. The weight by the length. So in the fullness is more focused on the weight. So when you are cutting girders, if it's the waist, you are going to fix it. Take the waist measurement. If it's 30, multiply it by how you want the fullness to be. Whether you want a light fullness, you can multiply it by 2. If you want more fullness, you can multiply it by 3. If you want much more extraordinary fullness, you can even multiply it by 10 if you want, if you have the fabric. So in summary, when you're cutting girders, know how you want the fullness and multiply either by 2 or 3, that 3 or by 5, anyhow. Then by the length, this is how wide the waist or the around arm where you are going to fix it times 2 or 3. By the length plus your allowance that you use to fix, either 3 inches or 2 inches. Same applies to pleats. When you are doing pleats, know where you are going to fix it. If it's the waist and the waist is 40, multiply by either 2 if you want less fullness. If you want more fullness, multiply by 3. So that, then don't forget to add about 10 inches allowance to the pleats when you are cutting. So after multiplying, just add an allowance for shaping. Then the flare too, when you are doing it, just take the weight of what you want, divide by 4, then add a little allowance. If it's for the waist, add 1.5. If it's for the sleeve, just add about 0.5. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. I hope you learned something today. If you have any questions, drop it in the comment section below or contact us on the number on the screen. If you want to join the Knaspa training, pick the number on the screen and contact us for more information. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or share. Join us in the next episode. Thank you.